thought itself, consciousness, is caught in a certain irrationality, in a certain disorder, confusion. Where that thought is conditioned. You see, we ordinarily think that our thought is free, that we can just be free to think what is true, right? But we're not that free, because everything that happens is recorded in the brain, actually materially. We could almost think of a tape recording. And this record is replayed as a set of instructions, similar to a computer program that makes us act in certain ways, to think, feel, and act in certain ways. So we may think that a certain thing is true just because it's on the program, and we act accordingly, according to that program, right? Now, see, that program is put in very early, not merely the useful things like language and techniques and all that, but also all sorts of prejudices and hopes and fears and beliefs. And now that program gives rise to many irrationalities. For example, there's desire. You see, we are moved by desire. You see, now desire, Krishnamurti, comes from the program. Now we've distinguished desire and true passion, which is a tremendous energy that is creative. Desire is programmed, and what you really want out of desire is some sort of state of perfection of consciousness. You want everything to be happy and good and right and orderly and harmonious and everything just right, you see. And that's the ultimate aim of desire. Now, the object of desire is not really desired at all. It's merely a means to the end, which is the state of consciousness, right? So we go through one object after another seeking this state, and it doesn't work. Now, it's not merely that disappointment arises in there, but desire creates self-deception. That is, the quickest way to satisfy desire momentarily is to engage in wishful thinking. That is, to arrange your ideas according to what you desire, you see. So I think that this self-deception, I've observed, is one of the major components of human thought. That is, most thought is self-deception. In fact, the dominant thought is almost always self-deception. However rational you may be in applying your techniques, the end is always determined by self-deceptive thought.
Can you give us an example of how that would work?
Yes, well, I'll give you an example of self-deception first. I take flattery. You see, a person may have been hurt as a child and loses confidence in himself. It's on the program. The program is always demanding overcoming that, so anybody who tells him he is good and right and so on is believed to be true. He can do anything, right? And everybody is seeking flattery and becoming very annoyed with insults and getting angry. And also people get angry, say, for not just for a second, as young children do, but for years and even, say, hundreds of years with, nations fighting each other, like Northern and Southern Irish and so on. And it all goes on the program, you see, generation after generation. Now, so you can see that, people have, what do they want out of life? Their supreme value. You see, some people want money, some people want power, some people want security, right? Well, they will believe anything which they think will aid that aim. You see that you can see the kind of self-deception that goes on, for example, about the oil shortage. It was known, say, in 1960 that there was going to be one. Nobody did anything about it. It became glaringly obvious in 1973, and since that period, nothing has been done about it. And people are still saying that's a story invented by the oil companies to raise prices, you see, which... and because it feels better to believe that.
They'd rather believe they're going to still have their cars. And,
that it's all going to be work out, you see.
Now, what does Krishnamurti offer as far as dealing with that self-deception?
Well, what Krishnamurti is suggesting is that we have got to somehow get at that program, you see. Now, that is not easy to get at because, you see, the program is recorded in the brain cells somehow, not exactly known how. And we have no organs inside the brain or nerves to tell us what those programs are doing, right? You can even cut into the brain and not feel anything, right? All our sensations come from nerves that are connected to sense organs, right? Now, what Krishnamurti proposes is there is nevertheless a way to be aware of that program, give it attention, as we give attention to an object outside. You see, the program is a material structure as this is, but one is inside, the other is outside. This thing outside, we don't depend only on memory to know what it is, but our senses also tell us something directly, right? So our thought is informed by the senses. Now, when it comes to looking inside, we haven't got any real senses, and we depend mostly on memory, which tells us nothing because it's just the program speaking. So what we can do is to observe this program reflected in two ways. We make a mirror, both in our relationships with others, which will show us our programs, and then also watching the feelings which those programs are producing in ourselves, like fear, anger, all the sensations all over the body, seeing the connection between thought and that state of sensation and feeling and bodily action. For example, if you're frightened, you see the whole body is tense, the heart beats faster, you may feel a sinking sensation in the stomach, and you say, I am afraid. Now, that is the mistake. You see, you don't see that, generally speaking, any sustained fear is part of the fear program, but you can actually see it if you really give it your attention and really work hard at it, and see that there's a connection between a certain thought and a certain fear or anger or pleasure or pain or sorrow or whatnot, right? And now, therefore, those feelings become the mirror of your program.
Now, with all of this, what are you saying that's much different from what a psychotherapy is in North America? I mean,
well, they don't tell you to do this at all. You see,
I thought you look at yourself and you try to figure out why.
They don't tell you what to look at, you see. You see, for example, they may tell you to go back to your past and find the incident which produced this thing, but that won't change the program, right? Now, if they tell you to look at yourself, they're not telling you what to look at. You see, if I say look at yourself, what are you going to look at? I mean, you could say, I see that I'm in trouble on certain points, but I feel certain feelings which are me, right? See, they accept the ego, and once you accept the ego, there is no way out. You see, they accept the ultimate reality of the ego, as the physicist is looking for the ultimate particle.
Right.
Instead of saying the ego is nothing but a structure in the whole, which can come and go, right? Now, if you say these feelings of anger, let's say you're angry, right? Somebody has said something to you, he's hurt you, and you're angry. Now you say, this anger is me being angry, and therefore my problem is either I must show the anger is justified, right? I think the anger is justified, or I say I shouldn't be angry. Well, both of those are merely modifications of the program. You see, your thought comes from the program, like the computer. So your thought says, this anger is justified, and you go on with it. Or your thought says it's not justified, and I shouldn't go on with it.
But you haven't dealt with the fundamental question of being angry?
No, because it's on the program. See, if you had a machine which was angry, programmed to be angry, now you could put on another program, don't be angry, and they would just be fighting each other. Or you could put on a program saying it's perfectly all right to go on being angry.
Okay, once you have that perception, though, that you're not dealing with it properly.
Yes.
If you try to rationalize it or understand it, then what do you do at that point?
Well, you see, what you have to do is to touch the actual material process of the program, right?
Right.
Now, see, awareness can touch that. You see that, for example, see, this program is nonsense, really. Is that clear? Some programs make sense, but this one doesn't. Now, generally, when you see nonsense in a simple affair, it loses its power over you. You see, if you said, I thought I was going north, and I see I'm actually going south, and you say, I don't feel an impulse to keep on going north, right? But you see, if you're angry and you can see that this thing is leading you into all sorts of nonsense, but you find you can't stop it because you haven't got to the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you can really see this thing at work, to see it is actually originating from memory, producing that feeling, then it becomes plain that it's nonsense, that there's no point to just keeping this machinery going. And
in a sense, that program then is erased. Or
it's made null and void, right? Or erased, I don't know.
Have you actually experienced that yourself?
Yes, I can see it. Now, you see, it requires that you keep on giving it attention. You see, there's no guarantee that it won't happen again, but when you understand what's involved, you see you can go into it each time, and when you've seen the basic point.
Now, the problem for me, I guess, is that I can understand that in terms of dealing with individuals, with people who come within your own sphere so that you can touch and interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very important kind of insight to have. Meanwhile, though, the world is rushing by. All sorts of terrible things are happening at the level of nations and groups of nations and so on. I mean, does this kind of insight have any relevance to the great global forces that threaten our very existence?
Well, in two ways. You see, first of all, the source of this global force is exactly the same as the source of what happens in the individual. That is the collective programs, right? That if they aren't changed, nothing can be done. You see, people have tried by every means imaginable, by religion, by science, by politics, to change this, and nothing has happened, right? It has gone on much the same over thousands of years. Now, somehow that is not going to change fundamentally unless you get at the root of it. Now, they see that the society is basically identical with the individual at this deep root, right? The society is nothing but the totality of individuals who are caught in this, who are in turn reinforcing each other. So we first of all have to understand what the problem is, because we may be just following a false hope by hoping that we're going to straighten it out in some other way. I mean, it may produce a momentary improvement, but it cannot really get rid of it. Now, the second point is that we cannot directly affect that thing. It's like, almost like Niagara Falls, right? It's going on its own way.
Right.
And but there may be a way, in the sense that if we had, each person who understands this in some way has removed himself from it. He's not adding to it. But also, I think that if we could get a considerable number of people who are doing this, who are able to do this, they would be able to really think together. See, ordinarily people can't think together. Each one has his own opinion, which is based on his own conditioning. And people really pay very little attention to each other when they try to think together, right? Now, if, say, say 10 or 20 or 30 people could really think together with one mind, I think they would liberate a tremendous energy which would affect the others, not perhaps finally in the sense of getting rid of the whole problem, but at least diverting. It would make possible a diversion of the present stream to something less dangerous. You see, I think
What makes you think there's that much energy in just a small number of people?
I think there's tremendous energy in people, but they don't allow it to develop, unfold. Krishnamurti likes to give various examples, like saying people like Hitler and Stalin have had tremendous energy, although they used it, it was done with evil purposes and so on. But a few people can give a tremendous impetus to the whole of society. And I think if somebody like Toynbee once said, that in the beginning, each civilization begins with a few people of very high energy who get things started. And it sort of rises up to the top and then falls because the energy gets lost. And the way I would say the energy gets lost is that the civilization accumulates traditions which are accumulated in the brain cells, and gradually the brain cells fill up with programs and people can't do anything new, right? So the civilization dies. Now, so I think that you can see now that very few leaders, for example, have any energy. You see, one looks at the politicians and say they're just repeating the same old story, though anybody should be able to see that none of the things they propose is going to work.
You're right on. We're running in a Canadian election right now. You're right on, yes.
Somehow, some source of new ideas is needed of a much higher energy. Something both original and very full of energy and passion, and which would be relevant to the actual problems. And I think that would actually, I think if people could see that there was something which would really be relevant to the problems and would divert us from this disaster we're approaching, it would take hold.
David Bohem, unfortunately we've run out of time and we've barely skimmed the surface. I always I'm very concerned about the electronic media because of the superficiality of the whole thing. And I think what we're showing right now is that we've barely begun to penetrate your mind to share some of these ideas. And I'm just sorry we don't have more time. Thank you very much for coming here.